So Kyle said there's a lot of photo and video evidence of UFOs and aliens. People just say, "Oh, that has to be fake because aliens don't exist." And I see what he's saying there. I want to just ask you, Dr. Go, just get a baseline here. Where do you stand on aliens?
So I wouldn't say that aliens don't exist. I would say, and this would be my scientific opinion, that there's no evidence that aliens are here, right? Mm-hmm. So could in the past, when the dinosaurs are around, could aliens have come to Earth? I mean, I don't know. There's no evidence that they're here now. The things that people cite as evidence is not evidence. Like not being sure exactly how they built the pyramids wouldn't be evidence. What would be evidence is if Egyptologists went into one of the tombs and pulled out a titanium shrink ray or something like that, right? Like that, I would be convinced that was something that the ancient Egyptians could not have managed to create on their own. But it's always just stuff that was around back then that they find. Now, with that being said, I think that there's probably a lot of life in the universe. I'm not sure how common this sort of technological advancement thing is that we do, because I mean, I alluded to this earlier. I don't necessarily think that that's like a long-lasting evolutionary path. So, think about all the other animals that have ever been on. Dinosaurs were around for over 100 million years. Sharks been around over 400 million years. Tardigrades, I think like 4 or 5 or 600 million years, right? Humans, we've been around for, it's on the order of thousands. Well, Homo sapiens, hundreds of thousands, our early human ancestors, maybe a few million more. So, I couldn't ever make the scientific claim that we definitively proven that aliens have never come here. I can make the scientific claim that I have never seen anything resembling the sort of spectacular evidence that would be required for me to believe that. And if I see it, I have nothing against it. I'll believe anything. I'll believe that I evolved from a squirrel 65 million years ago. If you just show me that evidence, I will believe it. I'll believe that my cells are made up of DNA that somehow like encodes everything about my life. This is like an unbelievable thing. That sounds like magic. That doesn't sound real. But I believe it because I see an overwhelming amount of evidence for it. And that's the same logic I would apply to anything alien related. I just got to see the evidence.
Yeah, I would say you were mentioning how it's like the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence and aliens extraordinary claims. We don't even get ordinary evidence for aliens, right? Like they insult us by giving us the least plausible shit possible. And to Kyle's comment where he said that there's a lot of photo and video evidence of UFOs and aliens. People say, oh, that has to be fake because aliens don't exist. So I agree. There is tons of evidence for UFOs. I would never say that UFOs don't exist because a UFO is an unidentified flying object. Yeah. All right. Got you there. There's no evidence that is an alien spacecraft. Just because you can show me a video or a picture, a drawing, 1,000 eyewitness accounts, there's no proof that it could be ghosts, right? It could be demons. It could be time travelers, interdimensional beings like fairies, robots. It could be anything. And so just saying like aliens is a sufficient explanation, but it's not a necessary explanation. And this happens with lots of things, like with gods or ghosts or whatever, that I've never seen a ghost. I wanted to really badly when I was a kid. I asked my folks if they believe, because I see all these movies where kids would see ghosts and their parents wouldn't believe them. And I asked my mom and dad, hey, if I saw a ghost, would you believe me? And they said, yes. I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be the kid. I'm going to be the kid who busts this thing wide open that ghosts are real. And I never saw one. And I looked really hard, but it didn't happen. But yeah, I think that I say something very similar to what Dakotah said about why we don't see any extraterrestrials that have visited us or no definitive evidence for it. And one is the distance, of course. They're so far away that it would be hard for them to get here, even if they found some way to travel. But I have the same theory that life, I believe there has to be tons of life in the universe. It's like a mathematical certitude, right? But life that's capable of producing technology to leave their planet, that has to be. We know it's rare. Like the Earth has been around, 4.5 billion years? And produced a grand total of one species capable of leaving its atmosphere. If that's replicated throughout the universe, we're going to have a hard time finding anybody else out there that knows this. But John.
I want to make the Iron Man argument against what you're saying, because
Oh,
I'm
let's
not
go.
disagreeing with anything that you're saying, but all I'm saying is if the human race right now was able to send someone back to 3,000 years ago
Mhm.
with access to modern technology, they could hide and observe everything going on indefinitely and never be found ever and never leave any trace of evidence.
That's okay.
Easily.
Okay.
And so to think that's just 3,000 years ago. Let's think about a species that's existed for millions of years that
Mhm.
could be here right now. We'd have no
So
fucking way to know.
This feels a little bit like Bertrand Russell's Teapot in Orbit.
teapot. All right, no, but I got one for this. I thought about this
Okay,
too,
okay.
because I thought about this. You ever see those images? Dakotah mentioned zoos before. You ever see those images where the zookeepers will wear like panda masks and hang out with the pandas or whatever and trick the yeah, and it's like, yeah, okay. If we can trick pandas like that, I'm sure that an alien being could trick us. Like the gap between us and any interstellar traveling species would be much
The
greater.
gap between us and us 200 years ago is
yeah,
that
right,
extent. You know what I
right.
mean?
So yes,
Mhm.
exactly. So my thing is that if those aliens have visited us and are here, we would never fucking know. That's how I know the people who see them are lying, right? Because like if you're telling me that these people can travel here from the Andromeda galaxy and their ship is capable of navigating, billions of light years, but they're going to crash in Nevada. Go fuck yourself. That's not going to happen. And so, yeah, that's actually my counter to that. Like, okay, it is like, yeah, maybe they are out there, but if they are, none of you fuckers have ever seen one. It hasn't happened. If they want to stay hidden, they're going to. So that's kind of my thing on that. But all right, I had a few questions I wanted to ask. I was telling John that last night I texted you the list of topics, and he said, "Be sure to ask space stuff." I said, "Buddy, we got the space stuff. Don't worry." So the question I had a commenter ask about this when they said, I told me you were coming on the show, about is the universe inside of a black hole? And like I've heard postulations that the universe is expanding into a black hole, and that black holes collapse into a singularity, and a singularity was as far as we know, the beginning of the Big Bang and everything like that. Is there any credence to this argument at all?
Yeah, so there's still some mystery around black holes. Kurt,
Some.
if you follow the Einstein's GR formalism, then there's a singularity at the center. But most people don't really think that that's real, right? We don't think that a singularity, something with with basically no space, and it's an infinitely dense object. We don't really think that that's real. I've always been a fan of this idea that, yeah, perhaps where universes come from is black holes. You have like a black hole on one side, and then maybe like a white hole, which is theoretical. It could exist, but we've never seen one. It would be something like what we think the Big Bang was. That makes sense. It sort of satisfies the curiosity of why is there a universe? It's like, oh, well, they just happen inside of black holes. Now, it doesn't like answer the question of how this process started, or like what was the first thing, or if there was a first thing. But I've always kind of liked that. I don't really think that there's sufficient evidence to believe that. I know that the theory got a huge boost recently because somebody made observations with JWST, the James Webb Space Telescope, and was looking at the rotation of distant galaxies and the direction that was. There's no real direction in space, but if you look at everything, you should expect to see a random distribution of galaxies, right? They should kind of be spinning in every direction. But this guy says that he saw a preferential spin in one direction as opposed to another. Now, that's weird. And that's something that you should be able to, or that you would need to be able to explain. And one of the explanations, there's probably 1,000. One of them is that, oh, well, what if we were in a black hole and the black hole had some initial angular momentum, was spinning in some direction? But you don't even have to go that far, honestly. You're like adding extra steps to that. You could just say that the Big Bang itself, for some reason, had some angular momentum, right? It's also possible that the observations are not as clean as the person makes it seem. So an interesting thing about that paper is that in the methods section, he pretty much exclusively cites himself, an earlier paper that he wrote. This is a single author paper, and he's citing himself mostly in his other single author papers. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? But it kind of causes you to raise your eyebrow. You know, one person found this. He's using methods that only he uses, and there hasn't really been any corroboration with other groups. So, you know, I'm not totally convinced that what he saw was real. And even if it was, and that is very interesting, it's not really, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's no more evidence that the universe is inside of a black hole than UFOs are evidence that aliens are here. It's like, I guess that's one of many explanations. It's probably not the most simple, though.
If what you were talking about with the Big Bang having some sort of inherent spin, or what's what we're looking for, bias in one direction or the other, wouldn't it kind of have to be, I don't know if it's spin necessarily, because like matter and antimatter, the fact that matter is everywhere and antimatter barely exists, like, why is that the case? Because you would think that it would exist. I mean, it couldn't exist in equal measure. There'd be nothing left. But like, why? It was one type of matter overpopulated than the other.
Yeah, this is, I mean, you just asked like one of the deepest questions in cosmology.
That's why you're here, man. That's why you're
here.
Yeah.
I don't think that there is no compelling answer as to why that is the case. Right now, we're sort of asking it from a survivorship bias perspective. If universes are common and they differ in any way, maybe there are universes where antimatter dominates. Maybe there are universes where they're exactly equal and there's nothing there. So yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I don't think anybody really knows. I don't have a good answer for that question.
All right. And you got one, John? I don't know. I didn't tell you to bring up space.
I do have one, and we also have an audience question. But
shit.
So let's get that one first because it's related to what you were just talking about. First of all, before I get to Kyle's audience question, I just have to read this on. I cannot believe. So Kyle says, this is a different topic on ghosts. It was likely like how some people can hear certain sounds, others can't. I've seen ghosts my whole life. Was evaluated for psychosis and came back negative. I went to therapy because I thought I was crazy because I thought ghosts weren't real, even though I saw them. Kyle, I just have to say, I have too. Thank you very much.
What?
You're not the only one. I'm convinced I've seen a ghost. But it's all right, TJ. We don't have to get into it right now.
Oh, we will.
So here's the thing. Like,
I'm a little bit interested in that.
We will.
Okay. Long story short, I'm very convinced my basement was haunted growing up because once we fucking did it, we just started seeing like some funky shit. One time, like literally, like we had like a recliner, right? And the recliner just started moving as if someone had just leapt out of it. I was home the fuck alone all by myself, and I was just like, what the fuck is going on? Now, I was a kid at the time. Maybe I was a dum-dum. Who fucking knows? But I feel like in general, ghosts is just a bucket that we put in a lot of things that we can't explain yet, but we will be able to explain in the future. I always talk about it like if you were explaining this fucking thing to like a Roman centurion, they'd have no idea what the fuck you were talking about. Like this might as well be just a fucking god tablet, you know? And like that's probably like a lot of things that people think are ghosts or whatever. They could be a million fucking things we haven't even fathomed yet. Not necessarily dead people. But you know, maybe they could be. Who fucking knows?
Maybe the chair was alive. I mean, who knows? Yeah, it could be 1,000. It could be 1,000. We don't know.
Maybe we're in a black hole. There's a gravitational fluctuation. The chair started moving. It always happens in one direction. No one can explain why. But the other question that he had was, is it true the Big Bang was recently called into question? I've kind of heard something like this, but I haven't looked too far into it. So do you know what we're talking about here?
I'm not exactly sure. You know, this is something that comes up frequently. Oftentimes there are, especially when JWST came out, one of the first discoveries was that some of the most distant galaxies, which, you know, if you think about the universe, if you're looking at light that has taken a long time to get to you, the most distant object is the oldest object. It's the objects that first formed in the universe. And it seemed like the galaxies that were the oldest were more formed than we expected them to be based on our current cosmological models, right? We expected the galaxies to form a little bit later, but it seemed like they were there earlier. And one explanation, there's probably several ways that you could explain that, but one explanation would be that maybe the universe is older than we thought that it was. But that means that you're assuming that your original model was right. And why does it have to be right? The original model could have just been wrong. Our models could have been wrong. And for whatever reason, dark matter sort of coalesced and brought things together sooner, right? Like that's one way to explain it. And JWST was literally made to study those galaxies. We call it first light, like the first light in our universe. So we had never seen that regime. We had models, but there was gaps in the data. We didn't know what went there. And you can try to extrapolate, right? But once you actually fill in those data points, it could be something different. Oftentimes, this is when we make new discoveries. But they went through and did follow-up observations. And I think those objects that they thought were early, well-formed galaxies are actually extremely bright, what are called black hole stars. So early in the universe, metal didn't exist yet. It was mostly just hydrogen and helium. And if you don't have metals in your star, you can actually make the star much more massive. In fact, you could make it so massive that the core, instead of just fusing hydrogen into helium, actually collapses into a black hole. So you have like a black hole at the center and like layers of a star on the outside. And the black hole is sort of emitting a bunch of radiation that pushes the star out, but the star is trying to collapse. And these are called black hole stars. And they're one hypothesis for how we get supermassive black holes, which we have one at the center of our galaxy, and we think that they're at the center of most galaxies. So it seems like those observations were really of a separate object, that they weren't actually galaxies. But the problem with any new discovery overturning the Big Bang is that when you make a new discovery, you can't erase the old data, right? You have to come up with a theory that now explains the new thing and the old things. And there's lots of independent data for a Big Bang like event that happened. So it almost doesn't matter what we discover now. You still have to come up.
Oh no.
Oh no, we lost.
Oh no.
The only guy who can actually continue this line of thought. Usually when like one of us drops out, the other one can be like, "Oh, I'm pretty sure he was going
he's
here."
back. There we go.
Did my connection time out? Maybe.
Yeah, it was right after you were talking about whenever a new information is discovered, you can't jettison the old.
A new discovery has to fit in the context with the old discoveries. You don't just say, "Oh, well, fuck the old stuff. Now we need a new thing." Like you still have to be able to explain, and the Big Bang explains all of these other things. So it's like, Occam's razor. We're probably wrong about how early galaxies form, but again, like I said, it seemed like those may have been supermassive black holes forming. So I would say no, that the Big Bang hasn't been like overturned or anything like that. There's just so much independent evidence that points towards that.